Welcome back to Knowledge is Kings, guys. I'm Kings, and a while ago, one of my manufacturers in China sent a couple of boxes hidden in the middle of a semi full of raw materials. The little boxes had Merry Christmas stamped on them, but by the time I got through enough material to find the boxes, Christmas was long gone. Here are the boxes that they sent. Inside are 12 shot glasses, each with 12 Chinese zodiac signs. They are cleverly designed to have each of the animals on the bottom, but you can still flip them over and they sit perfectly level. I thought it'd be cool to make a display to show off the unique little cups. This is the design that I came up with. Let's get to it. So to make the arches, I'm going to glue together shorter angled pieces. This is called a segmented circle. To make the pieces all the same length, I set a stop block on the miter saw, making a cut, turning the piece, and pushing the new cut against the stock block. It's a very fast, repeatable, accurate process. To glue these together, I put some painter's tape next to a straight edge and press the pieces onto the tape, keeping the long point of each piece tight together. I brushed some glue into the joints and rolled it all up. I thought I would use this band clamp to squeeze the joints together, as I have done this before, but since this wasn't a full circle, it didn't really work. The outside edges started to open up, and I tried to add a clamp to try to close the gaps up, but that didn't work either. Here are what those joints look like. As you can see, the joints are not tight, and a second after the camera stopped rolling, it broke in half. So that was a fail. For the second attempt, and the route I ended up going with, was to use CA glue with an accelerator. I was actually hesitant to use it because I wasn't sure how strong it would be, but I actually think that the CA glue can get into the end grain more and creates a pretty strong bond. I spread a generous amount of CA glue on the end of the one piece and spray the adjoining piece with the accelerator and then push them together as hard as I can for a few seconds. I love this method for a couple of reasons. One, obviously it's super fast. Two, the joints are always tight. And three, it doesn't require any clamps. After pushing the pieces together, I immediately took the pieces over to the drum sander to smooth them out. Once it was sanded down, and after making another one, I used a sheet of MDF to lay out where the circles would be cut out from the segments. Once I had it laid out, I put tape on the segmented piece and the MDF and CA glued them together. This will hold it down as I use the router to cut the circle. I'm using my 3.5 horsepower Makita plunge router to cut the circles, and I make a few shallow passes. I don't want to make a full depth cut right from the start, as this can cause tear out. My router is mounted to a shop-made trammel, and if you want to know how to make that, check out my other video that goes over how to do just that. Once the outside is done, I change the trammel cut length and cut the inside circle, again making shallow passes. Before I remove the circle from the MDF, I measure up from the bottom and make a couple arbitrary marks on the top and the bottom of the circle. These marks are just for reference. I need to have some marks so I can temporarily glue some boards onto the face, as you will see in a second. So I glued a scrap piece of MDF board on the bottom marks. The placement of that board isn't critical. Now for the scrap piece that I'm going to glue onto the top, it is critical that it is placed in the exact same place on both of the circle pieces. They both need to be glued sticking past the top of the circle the exact same amount. It also needs to be parallel with the first board that I glued on. Otherwise, when I cut them on the table saw, they will be cut differently. Once I have these boards glued on, I take it to the table saw, placing the top board against the rip fence and cut it to its final height. I need to cut slots into the arches to accept the glass shelves that I have, and I need to do it in a few passes as the glass is just under 1/4 inch, so I can't use my dado stack. With each pass I make, I run both pieces through, so they are both always the same. Once the slots are cut, I dry fit them together to make sure everything works out before I take the temporary boards off. Everything is looking good, so it's time to make the case. So the wood for the arches I already had milled left over from another project, so I need to mill more for the rest of this. I only have rough lumber, so I need to take my boards over to the joiner to smooth one face and one edge. If you want to do this project, you can buy surface lumber, S4S, which means surfaced 4 sides, so you won't need to have any of this larger equipment to do it. Once I have my 2 sides surfaced, I send it through my planer, surfaced side down, and plane it down to its final thickness. I used more wood than what I'm showing to make this project, but in the interest of not having an hour-long segment of surfacing boards, I'm just showing a small piece to demonstrate how I get it done. I'll need a thin piece for the back of this project as well, and while I could just plane a full board down 1/4 inch, that would be a waste. So I took a board that I had surfaced already and resawed on the bandsaw. This is a very small blade for resawing, but I didn't want to change the blades just for one cut. It worked out fine though. Once I have it cut in half, I send it through the planer to get it to its final 1/4 inch thickness. Once I have the pieces milled, I cut them to length for the box, and I'm adding a dado to the center and a rabbet on each end of the top and bottom pieces. Then I add 1 rabbet to the back side of all the pieces to accept the back panel. Then I just test fit the case pieces together. So I started sanding the case pieces so I can pre-finish the inside because it's a lot easier to do it now than when it is all together. Then as I was sanding, I remembered I needed to drill holes for the arch pieces. So I centered 1 arch on the back and drilled holes larger than the outside thread of the screws because I didn't want the screws to bite into the case, just the arch. Then I pre-drilled through those holes into the arch with a bit smaller than the screw threads. That way it grabs the wood without splitting it. I used the glass shelves to space the front arch correctly, then I followed the same steps as the first one to screw it in. Once that was all fitted, I sanded the arches and the inside of the case and prepared for finish. I'm using Rubio Monocoat Pure for the finish. I used syringes to not only remove the finish from the can, but for accurate measuring as well. I have 2 different syringes as it's a 2-part finish and I don't want to cross-contaminate the finish. It's really a 1-part finish with an added accelerant to speed up the cure time. This finish is expensive at $169 I think for just the 1 can, but a little goes a long way. What I mix here in this 3-ounce cup, probably about 1.5 ounces, is enough to do the whole project, and you only need 1 coat, as the name suggests. Once I have the 2 parts mixed in a 3-to-1 ratio, I set it aside for a minute to condition and clean the wood with mineral spirits. Because I don't have time to wait around, I use a heat gun to dry the mineral spirits faster. Once that is dry, I apply the finish. I just rub a little on with my gloves into the wood, and then I rub the excess off. With this finish, it is really important to get as much of the finish off as possible, and within about a half of an hour of putting it on. Otherwise, instead of feeling like smooth finished wood, it has more of a fake plasticky feeling. Also, if you leave too much on, you can get shiny splotches or small dots all over the project. Not ideal. Once the inside is finished, it's time for glue up. Nothing too special here, I just make sure everything is lined up and square and clamp it all together. The dado and rabbets looked like they were a little oversized, so I rubbed some black walnut sawdust in the cracks with some glue to hide the gaps. Those gaps will be our little secret. I clean the glue squeeze out on the inside off now, as it's easy to do while it isn't set up. I apply finish to the arches in the same manner. Then it's time to make the drawers. I rip a scrap sheet of pre-finished cabinet-grade plywood to the size of the bottom of the drawer first. Then I cut off the length of the bottom of each drawer off each rip piece. Then it's back to the table saw to rip the remaining pieces back down to the height of the drawer. Because of the size of the drawers, this is the most wood-saving way to cut this plywood. Then I reinstall the dado blade and make a rabbet along one side of both pieces that will accept the bottom of the drawer. Then I cut the side pieces to their final lengths. But before I remove the dado set on the table saw, I cut a rabbet on each side of the front and back pieces of the drawers, which I forgot to hit the record button for, but it looked like this. But you know, the blade was spinning. I do a dry fit of all the parts to make sure they all fit and they are square. Then I glue it all up, nailing it together with a cordless 18 gauge pin nailer. As I did before, I make sure to clean up the glue squeeze out now. I then test the fit of the drawers in the case that I've taken out of the clamps but haven't sanded yet, just to make sure they slide smoothly. For the fronts, I cut a piece about 1/8 of an inch bigger on each side of the drawer. I was making this project out of materials I had on hand, and I only had 2 handles to choose from that I had left lying around from other projects. A black pull, which I think works with the wood better, and a smaller silver knob, which I think works more with the size of the project. I ended up going with the black pull as I thought overall it complemented the project the most. Let me know in the comments which one you like better. I center the face using aluminum spacer blocks. Then I clamp it in place and drill out the holes for the pull. Once I have the handle in place, it holds the drawer front so I can add a few more screws to hold it in place. That way when I remove the handles, the front doesn't just move on me or, fall off. I decided to add a chamfer around the edge of the drawer fronts, the edges of the case, and the front edge of the front arch, which already had finish on it, but it also had some sanding marks on it, so I ended up resanding it, so it needed a coat of finish anyway. I'm using my palm router for this in a plunge router handle. Off camera, I sanded and put finish on the outside of the case, the drawer fronts, and the back panel. So it's time for final assembly. I attach the back arches first, as it's easier to do this with the back panel off. Then I screwed the back panel on. The back panel is screwed on, so if I wanted to screw this to a wall, I can just screw through the back panel to hold it up, and it wouldn't be held up by just glue. Then I reinstalled the drawer handles, which were removed for finishing, popped the drawers back in place, and it's finished. So now that the project is completed, there is one thing that I think I might need to change. The drawers are smooth, but as I pull them open and closed, air rushes in and rushes out, making it a little harder to open and close. I think I might need to drill a hole in the back to allow air to come in and out, otherwise it rushes and kind of stops you from closing the drawer. But other than that, I actually really love this project, and it was actually really fun to make, and it only took less than a day. So if you want to make this project and you only have a day before, let's say you want to give it to somebody, this is a perfect project to do. That's it for today's video. I hope you really enjoyed it as much as I did. Be sure to like this video as it really helps out the channel. And don't forget to subscribe so you can be entered into our current giveaway. Details are in the description below. Also, don't forget to put in the comments any projects that you'd like to see me do. And we will see you in the next one. Oh, I like that.